President Rodrigo Duterte agrees to the possible extension of the Bangsamoro transition period up to 2025.
Secretary Carlito Galvez Jr. tells lawmakers that the COVID-19 pandemic has taken a toll on the transition of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao or BARMM.
I recommended that the request for the extension be given due consideration, considering that the transition of 3 years is really a very short time. The normalization process will be stalled for maybe more than 2 years. If we want this transition to be successful, we have to give our brothers ample time to lay down the foundation.
Today is the second time in 2021 that the Department of Health recorded more than 2,000 additional COVID-19 infections in a single day. The government also extended the ban on foreign travelers from 32 countries for another 2 weeks over the new variant of the coronavirus. But what is the government's final decision on vaccine procurement?
Meanwhile, the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARMM, will celebrate the second anniversary of its ratification on January 25. There are measures filed in Congress now seeking to extend the transition of the BARMM from 2022 to 2025. But how will this process affect the 2022 local elections? And will the region finally achieve its dreams of self-determination and lasting peace? We discuss all of that in this episode of The Chiefs.
And welcome to this weekend edition of The Chiefs. And of course, with us on set is Robbie Alampay of One News. And joining us from Manila, from the port area in Manila, from the Philippine Star offices in Manila, is Ami Pamintuan, the editor-in-chief of the Philippine Star. Ami and Robbie, happy weekend.
Happy weekend. Pwede na.
Okay. Talagang pwede na. Okay. What's your big story today?
Well, we're still tracking COVID on two sides, di ba? First, in contact tracing dito sa British variant na Filipino who came home.
Yeah, the 21-year-old.
The DOH is saying they're having a little bit of problem. The majority of the passengers on that plane na contact trace na, but I think there's about 13 or so passengers that they're not even saying na hindi nila mahanap. They're saying uncooperative. And so they're starting to warn them. And then sa Senate, of course, sinisilip pa rin this matter of the vaccines, particularly Sinovac. Magkano ba talaga yan? How effective is it really? Senators are very, very worried.
Yeah, pag may COVID resistant, meron ding contact tracing resistant.
No.
Ganun, diba? Okay. Well, Ami, sorry, I'll have to do the segue now because we should be bringing our guest tonight. Of course, we'll be talking about the COVID-19 issue as well, but we should also note that coming up is the second anniversary of the Foundation Day of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARMM. And so we begin with that. Joining us tonight for our first guest is the co-chairman of the Bangsamoro Intergovernmental Body, Minister Mohagher Iqbal, who is also the Minister for Basic Higher and Technical Education. And I should also add that Mohagher Iqbal was the chief negotiator of the MILF and the author of the book with the pen name Salah Jubahir, if I remember correctly, A Nation Under Endless Tyranny. Minister, thank you for joining us and welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening, po.
Good evening, pa.
Sir, yes, sir. Sir, of course, we have heard of the reports that the MLF is asking for an extension of the BTA for another 3 years, going to 2025. But at the same time po kasi mukhang may resistance ng kaunti from some sectors, including, for example, Lanao Sur, which is the second biggest in terms of voting population. I understand Governor Alonto said that more than 32 of his mayors out of 36 or 39 are opposed to yung extension for another 3 years. Ano po yung inyong pinaka-compelling argument? What is your most convincing argument in favor of justifying an extension for 3 years?
Nabasa po sa conflict resolutions, sabi nila ay yung devastated na region o estado will take 20 years to rehabilitate. And then, tungkol naman doon sa transition, 3 years is too short. And I think the best timeline for the transition is 6 years to 7 years. Itong tatlong taon na ito, masyadong maliit ang nagawa po namin. Unang-una, yung first year, 2019, lahat ng programa at projects, project po ng BARMM, ARM po, Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, under the leadership of the former Regional Governor Majid Bataman. And then, pangalawang taon po, 2020, dumating po ang COVID. Lahat po kami, kasama po dyan ang buong Pilipinas po, almost hindi tayo matagalaw. At yung mga project po na nangangailangan ng immediate implementation at kailangan natin ng tao na magtrabaho, halimbawa, ay hindi ko nagawa. And then, 2021 po, yung mga projects and programs that were supposed to be implemented in 2020, i-implement po namin sa 2021 alongside yung mga programs and projects sa 2021. Magsasabay po yan. And then, as far as as far as I'm concerned, I think ang inabot lang natin ngayon, about 35 to 40% ang implementation po. Maraming dahilan po yan. Napakarami po ang mga problema na na-inherit po namin sa Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao. And then, inabulis po yung Autonomous Region of Muslim Mindanao, more than 6,000 apektado na mga empleyado po. And then, we are now trying to constitute or coming up with a new bureaucracy. And imagine na 6,000 lang po ang ipipila, pero ang nag-apply po, more than 300,000. So,
Pero Minister, ano po kasi, just to if you don't mind my interdicting, pero baka po kasi we're running against yung natawag nating very, very high expectations coming from the plebiscite. Alam mo naman, like what happened in 1996 with the MNLF, very, very high expectations. Ang sinasabi po ninyo talagang na-interdict kayo ng COVID-19, kaya't medyo butas-butas po yung nakaraang 2 taon. So, pero how will you convince po? How will you po convince your constituents na bigyan nga kayo ng ganong extension?
Kailangan po natin ang foundation of peace. Sa ngayon po, pag tingnan po ang implementasyon, normalization track po, at saka yung political track, which means yung implementation po ng provisions po ng Bangsamoro Organic po ay to me, I would look at it at half-cook. Yung half-cook na pagkain halimbawa, so sasakitan kaya natin dyan. So first and foremost, why we are seeking for the extension of the transition is that we want to put into place the foundation of peace, and then kailangan po rin natin yung normalization track po ay kailangan ma-implement po yan. Kasi pag hindi ko na-implement yan, yung nasabi ko kanina, half-cook po, so sasakit po yan natin po. It's not about power. We're not hungry for power. Otherwise, if we are hungry for power, we will not be joining the Moro National Liberation Front initially and the Moro Islamic Liberation Front. It's about establishing genuine peace and justice in Mindanao.
Minister, I think everybody can understand naman po with the disruption ng COVID. But I want to swing all the way to the other side. Kamusta po ba? What have been the achievements and what has been the progress of the transition so far?
Marami po. Una yung adoption ng transition plan 2019 at up to 2022, enactment of the Bangsamoro Administrative Code, gradual phasing out of employees and provisions of separation incentives, institution of replacement process for hiring of personnel, continuity of government services, intergovernmental relations body, strengthened review of collection, high investment report, turnover of 63 barangays that opted to join the BARMM, and the turnover of Cotabato City, effective COVID-19 response, capacity building and strategic partnership. At labing-tatlo po, we have passed in Parliament 13 very important legislation po. Among others po, marami pa po nagawa po namin. But the challenges ahead are still daunting and so many po.
Minister, nabanggit niyo po you're not interested in power. Kasi yun yung pinakamalaking criticism dyan sa proposal niya. Hindi ba ang sinasabi nila kasama na dun sa part of the transition is the capability to be part of the election process. Mag-election ako kasi next year So, kaya ba yon? Kung sakaling hindi matuloy, kakayanin naman na mag-participate dun sa local elections.
Sa totoo naman, hindi nyo kaya both the normalization track, ibig sabihin ng normalization po ay yung combat life po ng mga individual combatant po namin, magiging transform po yan into productive civilian life po. So, kahit na ho, hindi kami matutulog mula hanggang 2022, hindi ho kaya. At pangalawa po, yung panahon ni Missouri po, the MNA po as in power for 10 years, and then si Mujib Ataman po for 8 years po. Yung amin po, 3 taon po, hindi po kaya. We negotiated for more than 17 years po. Napakahirap po ang negotiation, and we cannot expect 17 years of hard negotiation to be implemented in just 3 years po.
Kung hindi po matuloy yung proposal niya for extension, what's your plan B?
Well, so far, ang plan A po namin for the extension for the reasons that I have cited. Ang plan B po, siyempre, hindi naman sigurado 100% na extend po ang transition. And for that, we are preparing for any eventuality in the future.
Sir, sorry, hindi ho ganong kaklaro yung audio natin pero ano po bali yung plan B kung sakaling po, kasi alam po naman natin yung Kongreso ngayon mukhang nagiging busy sa tsa-tsa. I suppose kailangan nyo ng congressional approval para sa extension. So again po, pakiulit lang po, ano po ang balak kung sakaling hindi nga maituloy yung extension ng 3 years?
Well, so far, this point in time po, isa lang po ang plan po namin, extension po. Wala pang plan B po.
But then what, ganito na lang po, ano po yung worst case scenario kung hindi po mag-grant yung extension?
We are not looking at possibility. And sa amin nakatuto po kami na hingin po namin sa gobyerno ng Pilipinas, especially sa Congress po, na extend po ang transition for the reasons I have just mentioned.
Okay. Now, in the meantime, Minister, I mean, we're talking about transition. There's this matter of transitioning from ARM to BARMM. Part of the transition also fundamental to this is the transition of the MILF from its armed campaign to mainstreaming into the political life of the country and of the region. Kamusta po on that front? The mainstreaming of the MILF, its participation in politics and becoming its own party.
Actually po, kung na-adjun po namin sa implementasyon po ng provisions ng Bangsamoro Organic Law is about 35% to 40%. Ngayon po sa normalization track po, siguro 30%. Isa dyan po yung decommissioning. Decommissioning po, siguro ang inabot lang namin yan, mga 25% po. And then marami po aspeto ng normalization track po. Kasama dyan po yung amnesty and pardon, yung transitional justice and reconciliation programs, nandiyan po ang disbandment of private armed groups, at saka marami po po. There are 8 sub-elements po ng normalization track po. So, about 30% lang po kami. Kaya ang gusto po namin, within the requested 3-year additional transition period, sana po yung exit agreement terminating the peace process between the government and the MNF would happen in 2025 po. Malayo po po ang dapat po maabot po namin dito sa normalization track po.
Sir, I think originally ang dapat 12,000 ang dapat na demobilize nung March of last year for the second phase, and then another 12,000 before the end of 2020 for the third phase. Tayo po ba'y umabot doon or hindi ho natuloy yung phase 3?
Actually wala hong timeline yan. But ang importante, mangyari po yung decommissioning ng combatants ng MILF as soon as possible. May 4 na phases po yan. Yung first phase po, yun ang sinatawag na symbolic decommissioning. Nangyari po yan 2016 sa panahon ng Aquino. And then ang second phase po, 30% of 40,000, which is 12,000. So, meron po 1 million package ang cost po 1 million package. Ang nagbigay lang po ng gobyerno 100,000 per combatant po. Pero yung socio-economic component po, inuumpisahan pero mas malaki pa po ang hindi nagagawa. And then kasama po dyan sa 1 million cost na socio-economic package, yung pabahe po. So hindi pa rin nangyayari po yan. And then before we can enter or we can proceed to the third phase, which is 35% of 40,000, kailangan po ma-operationalize po ang Bangsamoro Police, pero hindi pa po ma-operationalize yan. Kaya matagal po pa yan, hindi pa naman, siguro mga 30% lang po ang nakaya dyan sa decommissioning of the migrant combatants.
Minister, lahat po na itong programa nyo sa Kaplano will be heavily impacted by the COVID problem na hinaharap niyo po ngayon. Kumusta po yung sitwasyon ngayon sa BARMM, yung COVID, saka yung mga plano nyo for vaccination, yung sa mga, you're the Minister of Education, sa pagbubukas po ng schools. Kumusta po yun ngayon?
Very challenging po. Actually, wala akong face-to-face. Ang nagagamit lang po namin yung blended approach po. At maraming challenges po. Kung titulan po natin, yung budget po namin, wala po gastos para sa COVID po. So, natake po ang COVID, so we were flat-footed po. Kaya nahirapan din po kami para yung pundo po namin, ayusin namin, kahit paano, magpunduhan po namin, tustusan po namin yung gastos para sa para ma-address po ang mga problema tungkol sa pagdating po ng COVID, especially sa education po. So, hirap na hirap po kami dahil yun na, sabi ko kanina, hindi ko inaasahan na darating po ang COVID-19.
May personal ba kayong negotiation for vaccines, yung local government?
Tuloy po, nakalaan po, meron sa bayan po na nakalaan 500 million po para pambili po ng COVID-19 vaccine po. Pero tinitingnan po namin kung saan po namin mabili yan in a cheaper price po.
Sir, I hate to ask this, but I suppose it has to be asked. Kung sakali pong hindi matuloy yung proposal niyo for extension, yung inyo po bang grupo, are you looking at going back to the revolutionary track? If it comes to that po, is that even an option or hindi na po?
Our option po is no longer an option. The only option right now, and we are pursuing this option, is the option of peace.
Opo.
Baka ng gera, hindi lang yan. It's a thing of the past.
Opo. Well, that's also good to hear, sir. Sir, let me move forward, sir. You have been, the MLF has been in charge of BARMM for the last 2 years. In a lot of cases po before, like for example, yung kaso ni Nurmi Suarez sa MNLF, nagulat si Maas nung siyang maupo dahil parang ganito pala yung gobyerno at komplikado pala. I'm wondering po kung kayo po, from your end, did you have any learnings or new discoveries or epiphanies, I suppose, in the last 2 years of being in government?
Napakalaki po ang learning curve po. Marami po kami hindi alam. Kaya lang, medyo napadali at nagiging hindi masyadong mahirap. Dahil yung hindi ko namin alam, tinatanong po namin. At we are employing people who are experts on administration. And because we have been struggling for almost 50 years, so we have that dedication, we have that commitment and determination to overcome all obstacles along the way. So nakatulong masyado po itong ganitong pananaw.
Meron ng autonomous region ngayon, Minister, pero sa tingin niyo makakatulong kung mag-shift tayo to federalism?
Well, I would like to comment on that, Madam, because right now we are focused on the autonomous nature of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao. I think that's a national agenda, and we are not. That's not part of our. Hindi namin tinitilang pa yan sa ngayon.
Okay. Well, former MLF Chief Negotiator and now Minister Mohagher Iqbal. Sir, maraming salamat po for joining us tonight. Shukran.
Thank you po.
Maraming salamat po.
Thank you. Maraming salamat po.
We will just go into a gap, so please stay with us.
mentioned vaccine czar Carlito Galvez for his preference for Sinovac over other vaccines, which have higher efficacy rate and even cheaper. And in his defense, Secretary Galvez said that talks with the Chinese company is not yet a done deal.
Naman po dito, ang vaccine efficacy ng Sinovac is only 49.58, which is below the threshold imposed by the World Health Organization.
Can the third person just answer kung pwede pa bang hindi natin bilhin yung Sinovac?
Ma'am, the answer to that is yes.
Welcome back, the Chiefs, here on One News. We are now at the final stage of our conversation. Now joining us is Dr. Aleli Sudiacal, a member of the IATF Technical Working Group on COVID-19 variants. She is also from the DOH Technical Advisory Group, as well as the Health Professionals Alliance Against COVID-19. Good evening, Doc. Welcome back to the Chiefs.
Good evening.
Hi. Good evening po. So let's start po with this the COVID the British variant finally being confirmed here in the Philippines. On the one hand, mukhang mabilis naman po yung contact tracing, although now we're getting reports from the DOH, they're having to warn a few people on that plane dahil uncooperative daw sa pag-contact trace. Then yesterday, we take note, Mayor Joy Belmonte had to speak out on behalf of her constituents in Kamuning. Kasi,
Nagkaroon ng crisis sa Kamuning.
dinidiscriminate daw ng mga workplaces yung mga just because taga Kamuning. What are some things to qualify for the public right now, to clarify for them? And now that contact tracing efforts are there, what's the priority now for government?
Maybe one thing we can do is to start by clarifying that this particular individual was actually isolated from the time he arrived from abroad, no? And actually, I don't think this person ever had the opportunity to go home since the time he arrived back in the Philippines, no? Ang naging difference lang is from facility-based quarantine, the patient was transferred or the case was transferred to another facility so that the monitoring could be done more closely. So siguro kung yung concern natin is nakakalat na ba to dun sa area kung saan siya nabalitang nakatira, parang hindi very likely, no? So I think for as long as yung mga tao dun sa community were compliant with the usual recommendations about wearing a mask, wearing face shields, maliit ang chance ang merong nagkahawaan doon.
So controlled environment po. In other words, you're saying controlled environment siya since January 7 when he arrived?
Correct. That's right.
Ma'am, but do we have any indications so far of local transmission? Because I suppose that is what we are watching out for. Kasi he may have gotten it abroad, so that's a different thing altogether. Pero if it gets transmitted here, I suppose that's the time that we really are in trouble.
Well, so because we know that this thing is so transmissible, that's precisely why nag-iingat nga tayo, no? And we're contact tracing whoever the patient may have interacted with, and likewise the people that he traveled with, and also the people on the plane. No, so this is actually going more than the extra mile para lang siguradong tayo na hindi nagkaroon ng opportunity na kumalat itong variant na ito.
Doctor, yung isa pang minomonitor ngayon, of course, is the selection of the vaccine that we are going to roll out. Pinakamadali. Mukhang ang gusto nga kasi ng government is Sinovac. Pero kanina during the Senate hearing, lumalabas na below 50 daw yung efficacy according to the test sa Brazil. Ano yung magiging impact na? Although sinabi nga ni Secretary Carlito Galvez na di pa naman nga daw done deal yun. Although I think it's unlikely na mai-scrap. But anong impact na kung ganun kababa yung efficacy?
Ami, I think part of the discussion in the Senate kanina was also to talk about the selection process and the safeguards that are inherent in the process. So I hope you were also able to pick up the discussion that was presented by HPAC through Dr. Tony Dance, no, where he described each of the stages that any candidate has to go through and the vetting process that each candidate vaccine has to undergo. Now, our point is as HPAC that for as long as these vaccines go through proper evaluation and their qualities no are evaluated by the technical experts, then we should be reassured that whatever finally becomes available is safe and effective.
Yes.
Okay. But we also understand po naman kasi the point na yung minimum ng WHO is 50% and everything above that should be good to go. But I think on the other hand, there are also people who say na yes, 50% is better than none, but 70% is better than 50, and 90% is better than 50 pa rin. So you have that batuhan po eh. What should we remember? How should we qualify this? What should we keep in mind when people throw around these numbers? Plus, may bago pang number ka na si Ping Lacson, 49.58. Quoting the CDC, I don't know where he got that from the CDC. I was trying to Google it, I couldn't find it. So, have you heard of this number? And is it a legitimate number?
Okay. So, maybe if you'll allow me, I'll share what I share to people who ask me personally what my choices are. Because
Yes,
it's a typical question, no, that anybody would ask a doctor.
Yes, ma'am.
So, first, what I tell my friends is, when you choose a vaccine, paramount yung considerations of safety muna. Minsan over efficacy, actually always over efficacy. You have to be able to prove that that vaccine is safe, then you look at efficacy. Now, in this current scenario and in every other scenario where vaccines are made available to the public, there are evaluations that are made by different groups to ensure that these vaccines achieve quality standards of safety and efficacy. Now, because COVID is such a new disease, we're actually more than careful when we look at the properties of these vaccines. Normally kasi, ang tumitingin niyan is FDA. Then if this becomes available or should be available in the public program, then that's HTAC. And then it's commercially released. But now, not only do you have FDA, you also have HTAC, you also have the vaccine experts panel, FDA also has its own vaccines panel or scientific advisory group, then you also have the NITAG. So that's like 4 or 5 different technical expert groups that are looking at this before it even comes out to the public. So with that in mind, no, and for as long as we're assured that that process is followed, then for me personally, I say whatever becomes available first to my hospital is what I'm gonna get, because my mindset now is if I'm not vaccinated, I'm zero protected because there's nothing. But if you can give me something by next week or by next month, that's sana 90, no? Pero kung 50 yung available, that's still better than not getting anything at all.
Okay. I guess, ma'am, I think everybody's in agreement, man. They have a lot of faith in the experts, in people like you, the people in FDA. People and I think this is not going to be controversial to say the problem of the people is with the politicians. And there seems to be a dissonance. I mean, what are we missing here? Because there seems to be a dissonance between what the experts keep saying and keep reassuring us, huwag kayong mag-alala, may proseso, basta magdaan sa proseso. But what we're hearing from Malacanang is, don't be choosy, wag na kayo maraming tanong, wag niyo, magtiwala na lang kayo sa amin. And then at the end of the day, ang nakabalandra dyan are the Chinese-made vaccines that do not have EUA yet and that have not gotten the results yet on the third phase of the clinical trials and so on. So there is clearly a dissonance there. So not to put you on the spot, but my question to you as an expert is, we trust the process, but do you trust that the process will ultimately win out over politics and will ultimately have the final word here?
So speaking now as somebody from HPAC, we've made that our objective, no, that we will safeguard the process. That will be our commitment to our colleagues whom we represent, so that we can ensure that when we talk to our patients and say this is a good choice, we know where that particular recommendation is coming from.
So we can be, I'll follow that up now. We can be reassured na hindi ma-overturn yung process or someone will jump the gun on you. Kasi yun ang nakikita namin ngayon. Starting with the vaccination of the PSG way back in September. And then, yung sinabi nga, one cabinet member daw got vaccinated. Hanggang ngayon, we don't even know who this person is. So merong perception yung public na wala namang masusunod dyan. It's every man for himself. Yun ang perception ngayon. How do you overturn this perception? And it's not entirely a baseless perception, considering what happened. So we're trying to get some reassurance from you guys dahil kayo yun directly, you are supposed to administer. Inabi ng PSG, kami lang nag-administer sa sarili namin. Yun nga, na-bypass na kayo doon eh. So, how can we be reassured na kayo nga mismo, baka mamaya may pupunta dun sa probinsya, sila din, kanya-kanya din sila mag-vaccinate.
And let me get straight to the point. When the President himself says na, huwag kayong mag-alala kasi yung efficacy ng Chinese made, kasing galing naman ang efficacy ng galing sa US at sa UK. There's no basis for that, and yet that is the President telling the whole country. So, and again, that's not just dissonance, that's totally counter to what we know so far.
I guess we're saying we trust your process, but there are so many people jumping the process.
So, you know, you're really raising very difficult questions that we ourselves are grappling with.
Okay.
And of course, I have to agree that there's dissonance. Parang bulag ka naman kung hindi mo i-acknowledge yan di ba? Kaya nga kami, our commitment nga is to ensure that we guard the process because we already know that that's happening, that there is a lot of discussion going on in public about why this is happening and why that is happening. And, you know, we can only control what we can do. And for as long as we're able to do what we're supposed to be doing and not compromising those principles, then we hope that the public will also come on board with us and support us when we ensure that the processes are being followed.
I hope you don't mind me phrasing this way, but is that an ongoing how will you call it? Is that an ongoing debate? Is that an ongoing struggle? Is that an active campaign that you have to wage every single day? I want to get a sense of, in particular, where the technical working group has interfaced with, for example, Secretary Carlito Galvez, and so on. How is the dynamic and just the general vibe when you give your blunt scientific advice on what can be trusted, what cannot be trusted, what has data, what does not yet have data?
So I have to clarify, I really am wearing so many hats, no? And I think what you're asking me is consistent with the work that I do as a technical working group member. And my work there is primarily with DOH, and of course, they're really quite receptive, no? I have no issues with how they receive our information and how they act on it.
Is there any movement within among health professionals? I know you have your group. Are you organizing yourselves to ensure nga that the process will be followed? Meron bang gano'n na nangyayari ngayon? Considering everything that's happening now?
So the presentation earlier in the Senate was actually a result of those efforts. No, we were able to make our views heard by the senators. I hope. No, I think as that hearing went on, I felt like they received the message because the line of questioning was actually asking, was the process followed? So we hope to be able to keep that conversation alive in our future encounters. On Monday, there will be a press conference to further talk about these issues, and we will be emphasizing the same concerns.
Ma'am, let me take a different tack. Let me see if I can approach it a bit differently. Was there any indication that there was a default preference by government for Chinese vaccines, regardless of which vaccine gets approved first, or regardless of which vaccine becomes available first? Because that's the impression that we've gotten since last year. That from the very start we were going for Chinese vaccines even before the vaccines were discovered. So, well, please tell me if I'm getting this wrong. Was there a default preference for Chinese vaccines to begin with, regardless of when the vaccines are going to be available and how much they are going to cost, and whether they are effective? Sorry, I hope I didn't put you on the spot. Because it's a recurring question from last year.
Yes, I'm hesitating because I don't really know how to answer you, because what I have in terms of information is what I'm getting from media as well. No, I was not privy to any discussions about vaccine until very recently, because those discussions were housed in the National Task Force. So those discussions were going on in different groups. And of course, since I did not have any first-hand information about that, it's not fair for me to comment.
Okay, ma'am. Well, yeah, yes, we understand. Well, ma'am, sige, ma'am, moving forward, we expect the first batch of vaccines to arrive by the second week of February. I think it's going to be Pfizer coming from the COVAX facility. Do we have enough preparations already for the arrival of these vaccines? Like, is a freezer behind you? Is that an ultra-low temperature freezer, or is it ice candy inside?
Sana pwede ako mag-stop, pero no. Well, talking about the freezers, yes, DOH tells us that the plans are in place, okay? And I understand that there are several already. They're still beefing up the supply. Manufacturers also helping in the sourcing and in the setup. So you know, everybody's very conscious about the need to maintain the correct temperature for these vaccines, and I don't think anybody would risk the supply without getting that ready, because we know how precious these vaccines are. Hindi tayo magkakaroon ng pangalawang pagkakataon kung masiraan tayo ng bakuna. Sayang din.
Ma'am, what about the human resource? We discussed that last week. Na sinabi na, hey, we can look at the cold chain and so on, but the human resource is something that we also should have an eye towards also, especially if we're going to be inoculating 70 million Filipinos. How much manpower do we need, and do we have it?
So from what I was told, no, about the plans, because yesterday we had a Philippine Medical Association town hall where several of the teams from DOH made their presentations. No, their plans, no, seem to be very valid. They have accounted for the health human resource component that's needed, although we understand that this is really going to stretch what we have right now. Siguro the only thing that's going for us is we don't expect all of these 1 million plus or 4 million plus doses to come in all at the same time. No, they will be staggered. This will allow us to actually phase in more people. But of course, it's always an advantage to have more people available, because it will allow for the regular programs to continue. Kasi we have to keep in mind also that this does not suspend all of our regular health maintenance programs in the public health sector. And we're going to be stretching the few people that we have and giving them another task.
What are the biggest challenges that you're seeing? Kasi right now, the LGUs are pitching in, the private sector, the businessmen, the hospital association, they're providing the cold chain. What are the major challenges you're seeing once the vaccine is finally rolled out?
I think it's very critical to get the public to start to understand what we should be expecting from these vaccines, what's reasonable to expect, no? And also to build trust and confidence in the vaccines and in the process also. So those are really going to be very significant communications challenges that we're already working on now, sector by sector. We're targeting first the health workers, because we understand that they're going to be the first set of people to receive these vaccines. And you can imagine if the uptake among healthcare workers is low, what kind of confidence will the public have? No? So we really need to communicate and reach out to the health workers and address their issues so this can be settled before the vaccination program rolls out.
Have you been conducting informal consultations? Do they have vaccine preferences? Kasi yung mga LGUs, they have been consulting with their constituents. Have you been conducting this?
So, one of the presenters yesterday in the town hall was Dr. Nina Karandang. No? She's a social scientist, and she mentioned that she had been able to do a poll from among a particular subspecialty society membership and also among a group of DOH personnel. And the question centered mainly on uptake rather than brands. And so there were several issues that needed to be addressed. There were several trust and confidence issues that we felt would need a lot of effort to work on so that we're ready for the vaccines when they come.
Ma'am, let me ask you a question I asked Red Cross Chairman Richard Gordon last night. Most people kasi have this mindset na pag nabakunahan na ako, okay na tayo. Let's move on with life. But do we even know how long the vaccine effectivity is good for? Is it 6 months, 1 year? Kasi nga, sabi nila, ang flu vaccine, you take it every year. And for all we know, baka mamaya, yung nabakunahan na una, nakapila na ulit doon sa dulo ng linya, samantalang hindi pa tapos yung pagbabakuna ng 70 million. And so it may go on is it going to go on in secula secularum, forever and ever? Or is it going to stop at a certain point, do you think?
So that's a really good question, no? And it's something that we don't have the answer to. We don't even know if somebody who's already been vaccinated is ever going to say na I will never transmit the disease, no? So there's a term for that, transmission blocking. We don't know if these vaccines are transmission blocking. So the current situation is if you're vaccinated, you still have to practice minimum health standards. What you're raising right now is how long will protection last? Mm-hmm. Nobody knows that. And for all we know, worst case scenario, in 6 months, we might be vaccinated. Hopefully, that's not, but we don't know. So that's why it's very critical for a post-vaccination surveillance program to also be in place. And that's part of what the system is anticipating already.
Ma'am, ako, yung tanong ko is on the level of something that we've observed when it comes to LGUs. It goes to this whole issue about being choosy. No? But to be serious about it, dalawa kasi yung nagiging sagot eh. They do put a serious thought to it and serious answers. One answer that some LGUs say is, hindi, kumbaga kung ako sa doktor, trabaho ko yun to educate my patient, di ba? Parang, then maybe I just need to, my effort, the burden on me is to educate and to reassure them. But the other doctor, the other mayor will then say, hindi, I come from, hindi, whatever it is to educate, kung ayaw niya at hindi ko siya pwedeng i-require, I have to take into consideration yung pagiging choosy niya. Because otherwise, sayang lang yung kukunin kong gamot. So, where as a doctor, where would you stand here? Because on the one hand, that's what we're perceiving from this whole initiative from the LGUs. They're really telling government, we cannot ignore our constituents because they really want to choose, or to be precise, they really do not want these Chinese vaccines. Kahit pa effective yan, kahit pa kaya namin i-educate yan. So where do you think LGUs and government should stand on this?
You know, that's an age-old debate, actually. Parang where does personal autonomy end and public health considerations start? Because talking about personal choice and balancing that with the need to control a pandemic is a really difficult balance to achieve. Again, referring back to the discussions yesterday in our town hall, that was one of the things that was surfaced. Paano ngayon kung healthcare worker ka? Tapos nakakaintindi ka naman ng bakuna, alam mo naman na importanteng mabakunahan, lalo na sa linya ng trabaho mo, pwede kang magkaroon ng sakit every day that you're facing your patients. But for whatever reason it is, you don't want the vaccine that's being offered to you. So are you allowed to choose? Up to what point will that be? And how do you balance now the need for yourself to be protected and your right to have a personal choice? No, so there are no easy answers to that. But I guess in the end, no, what will have to happen is the person needs to understand the consequences of his or her choice. So that's why there is going to be an informed consent for every vaccinee. And that adds another layer of complexity. Kailangan lahat ng babakunahan, ipapaliwanag natin ano ba yung matatanggap mo, ano ba yung dapat asahan mo, anong klaseng proteksyon ang matatanggap mo. Sasang-ayon ka, you will have to sign a consent form. And if you choose to defer, then you have to sign a form that says, I understand what I'm giving up and I'm willing to give it up.
May isa pang question which is being increasingly asked. Halimbawa, you accept the Sinovac vaccine now. Can you accept and you complete the 2 doses? Can you be vaccinated again pagdating ni Pfizer? Is that safe?
Well, we can actually ask the question the other way around, right?
Yeah.
It's basically talking about, can I receive one vaccine and receive a second dose of another?
No. Now you complete the dose of one brand and get another brand, complete dose pa rin.
Yes, so there's, again, usually, no, pagka ganyang mga scenarios, the only thing doctors can tell you is, Ami, there's no data. We cannot tell you whether that's safe or not. Because nobody's ever done a trial that looks as information as like that. No? So that will need to be your personal choice if you wish to do that.
Yeah, be on the safe side. Never mix drinks. So,
That's also true.
Kasi kanista ka.
okay.
Medyo kasi.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Annalisa Onglim, member ng IATF Technical Working Group on COVID-19 Variants. Doc, maraming salamat for joining us tonight. And we hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Salamat po.
Thank you po. And that'll be all for this weekend edition of The Chiefs. We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Edlin Gao.
I'm Mami Paminton of the Philippine Star.
I'm Robbie Alampay and we are One News.